Well, hello. I am so very excited to be with you today in a forum that is different for those of you who know who I am. I'm Chrystal Evans Hurst, if you don't. And this is a little bit different of a forum than many of you see me often. Um, I am online doing a lot of different things, but I also want to do the thing that my mother was doing and that she left a legacy of doing and that we want to continue, and that is ministry to pastors' wives. The pastors' wives ministry, of which my mother was one, is very dear to her heart. And the reason is because she understood that that road can often be lonely. It can often be riddled with questions. And there are not a whole lot of women necessarily that a pastor's wife can go to get the answer. The beauty of these conversations that we're having today and that we have often, and the beauty of this ministry is that it provides a place for pastors' wives to connect, to hear from one another, and to hear specifically about issues that are unique to their situation. However, in doing that, we also have the blessing and the opportunity to share that conversation with my mom's audience. We'll be sharing with my audience today as well. The reason being is because while some of the issues are unique to pastors' wives, the philosophy and the theology and the principles behind those decisions that pastors' wives make and how they relate to their husbands, their children, their community, they are principles we all can learn from. And so, from the pastors' wives ministry today, we're having a conversation, and I'm really excited about the guest that we're going to have with us today. My guest is Tiffany Daniels today. She is from Arlington, Texas, and it's so cool that we've had the opportunity to cross paths for a variety of reasons. We know the same people. Tiffany has been very engaged with young teenage girls, and because of that, my late cousin Winter Pitts, who was also committed to the spiritual development of young women, crossed the path of Tiffany with her daughter Alina, and Tiffany has a conference for young women. So that's how I first came to know about Tiffany Daniels. But in the process of the years going by, she and I have had a chance to connect, text each other every now and then, and also meet for coffee. And what I know today is that you're in for a treat. Tiffany is the wife of her husband, David, who is the lead pastor of Central Bible Church here in town. She's a proud mom of three lovely children, and she has one daughter in law. She also has two grandchildren. She's committed to discipling women, and for the last 25 years, she has led college girls in a weekly Bible study and been a mentor to women in her community. And I happen to know which coffee shop she likes to frequent when she likes to meet them for tea or something hot to drink. She started, I know a lot of her ministry started because of her own desire to minister to her own daughter and seeing how crucial it was for teenage girls to have something that was Christ centered to encourage them to develop their spiritual life and to love Jesus, and to do that in a way where they had fun and they had something built for them. So her passion is to see the hearts of high school girls transformed by the gospel. And you see this come alive with the organization and conference that she's founded, her passion project, There4 Gathering, which I'm sure she'll tell us all about. So I'm excited for you to meet my friend Tiffany Daniels. And I want you to know that as she comes on the screen, we want you to be involved. I've got some questions for Tiffany, but if you have questions also, we would love for you to ask them in the comments so that we can make sure that before we end, that we have scratched the itch of the practical issue you may be dealing with today. Hi, Tiffany.
Good morning, Chrystal. So
I
glad
am
to be here.
so glad to have you here.
Thank you.
Well, I wanted to start off by you telling us anything about your life as a pastor's wife in the ministry for so long that I didn't already say. Maybe even about your children. Anything that you feel like would be helpful for us to get to know you better.
Sure. My husband and I have been in ministry for almost 30 years. We started in Austin, Texas with youth ministry and 11 years of college ministry, and then went to the Great White North up in Minnesota for a couple years. He was got called to be a lead pastor there. And then we've been back in Texas for over 16 years at Central Bible Church. So he leads a beautifully diverse congregation on Sunday mornings. We have probably pre-pandemic about 1,300 people that come to our church, and also have a sister church on our campus for a group. It's a group of refugees that showed up on our doorstep about 10 years ago and wanted a place to hold church. They were from all over Africa, and had resettled here in Fort Worth. So that's an exciting sister church that we also work with.
That's awesome. I love the longevity of the ministry that you have had that history alongside your husband. I know that there are seasons of variety in terms of the perspective that you have,
Mm-hmm.
raising children in all these different seasons, seeing the church grow and develop in all these different seasons, seeing how you and your husband relate to each other and to the Lord as you've grown and developed too. But I know that we're in a season, right now where um, the cart has definitely been toppled, I mean, whether that is how we do church, when we come to church, who's coming to church, which ministries are engaged and involved, and that looks different for everybody depending on where they are, of course, all over the world, but also even just in the United States,
Mm-hmm.
because of COVID and how that has affected us differently depending on where we live. There's such a different reaction and engagement with each other in light of the virus based
Right.
on the region in which we live, and so that's been a whole thing. But what I love about one of the things you said to me when we first met in person for coffee, um, you were just talking about how you and your husband, your heart and the heart of your church was to be utilized in the ministry where you are. I mean, you
Mm-hmm.
literally got planted in the building space that you're at to be strategically positioned
Yeah.
to be in ministry for Dallas and Fort Worth areas. And
Mm-hmm.
even by what you just said, how you exemplify that the refugee community that now has a place to hold church. And so I
Mm-hmm.
love your heart for that. That extends to, of course, There4 and this ministry that you have for young girls, just seeking to be a blessing to a different population. Can you talk to me a little bit about how that even began? How that got birthed in your heart, how it got started, where it came from, just so we can even get a little bit behind the scenes and the inside
Yeah,
scoop of how God led you.
for sure. So my youngest is a girl, and I walked through some challenging years with her as a teenager. I was trying to be as engaged as I could with her friend group, and it gave me a real picture of a behind the scenes of what it was like to be a teen girl in today's culture and how challenging that was. And in about 2015, the Lord just impressed on my heart that there needed to be a space in my mind where there's 1,000+ girls that could come together and talk about the real life issues that they're dealing with social media and the sexual sin that's going on in the world, pornography, all the issues that are coming at them. And God just gave me a dream and said, gather as many girls as you can, 1,500 girls, at a conference, and let's talk about this, and let's pour the truth of the gospel into their hearts and lives at this impressionable age. So that was about 7 years ago. And we have continued to have a yearly conference every February in Fort Worth, and have now expanded to a live stream because of the pandemic. And it's now a worldwide opportunity for girls to tune in.
So if someone is listening right now and they're like, "Oh my gosh, tell me where that is. I don't wanna get to the end before we give that information." If someone's like, "I have girls in my church who either would wanna come because we're in the Dallas-Fort Worth area or we're gonna stream because we're not," where do they
Yeah.
go to get more information about the event?
They can jump on our website. It's there4gathering.com. And I'm going to spell it THERE, the number 4, gathering.com.
Thank you so much for that. So, when this was becoming something that was clear to you that the Lord was impressing upon your heart to do, Um, how did that discussion go with your husband? Is it just something you had been noodling over for a while and he was totally aware? Was it
Hmm.
something that had been impressed upon your heart and you finally were like, I guess I'm supposed to do it? And so he got the whole thing at once. How did that initial sharing go with him?
That's a great question. Typically, I've been the small group, one on one. That's my sweet spot. And when I came home and told him, "Hey, I want to do this big thing," I think he was a little surprised, to be honest with you, but supportive. And I think, I just started communicating my hopes and dreams to him, and did a lot of talking, and he was he was on board as it unfolded.
That's great. So I know that often, um, if a wife, and any wife, but in particular, a pastor's wife, um, is talking to her husband about something she really wants to do,
Mhm.
and there's opposition.
Mhm.
The feeling can be, well, oh, I do all this stuff to
Mhm.
support the church and
Mhm.
support the
Mhm.
ministry, or it can be very disheartening to feel that way. But
Mhm.
even though you said he was very supportive, were there any concerns that he had at all that he expressed to you?
Sure. I mean, you ladies know that being a pastor's wife is a full-time job. It comes with a lot of responsibilities outside our home. So I think there was some, hey, how are we going to juggle your commitments to be a pastor's wife, be at these meetings, be at these gatherings with me, but also run and do what you want to do. So I think communication was key. We started, there's a yielding that happens too, we can talk about that, but I think just um a constant check-in, like, okay, what are you thinking for this month? What does your schedule look like? Where can I give? Where can I support? So we can talk more about that.
Yeah, the word yielding, sounds a lot like submission, which, women always start getting itchy when we talk
Yeah.
about that, but
Yeah.
we will talk about that.
Yeah.
So right now, this ministry is thriving. I'd love for you to describe the commitment that it requires from you, like meetings with the team to develop the conference, or with the teens that you have involved. Because I would love for us to understand clearly what the weight, in the best sense of the
Yeah.
word, the blessing, but the burden of even if it's enjoyable, just the reality of what it takes to walk forward with this vision. What does it look for you to shoulder that? Because I want to talk about that before we segue into how you now continue to balance all the things,
Yeah.
home and
Yeah.
kids and grandchildren and church life and all that. So what does that commitment look like?
I think you said it well. It's a weight. It's a privilege, but it is a weight that we carry. It's honestly turned into a full-time job. Um,
On
that
accident, an
Yeah,
accidental full-time job.
but what are you gonna do, right? So I personally have don't try. I try to stay true to my own disciplines on a daily basis. I think that keeps me healthy and in the game. But it is a full-time job. I have a staff, I have a team, and it's like running a business in some sort. It's like running, a ministry. We know.
Yeah.
Um, and we also have a mentoring program for teen girls that kind of runs parallel to our year-round planning for our event. So that's people, and that's being wanting to be present in these girls' lives. And as we all know, people, they take a lot from us. So just staying healthy uh, in my own head, my personal disciplines of being in the word and exercise and finding time for rest is so important.
That's so good. That's so good. So when you I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about that. Just you
Yeah.
mentioned your disciplines and rest and all that. Like, I always like to refer to this idea as pillars. There are certain pillars in all of our lives where we say,
Mhm.
if I'm not doing this, then something's out of whack. And like for
Yeah.
some of us, that may be
Yeah.
if my husband and I haven't been out on a date in a while, there's something out of whack. Or
Mhm. Mhm.
if we've been eating out too much, there's something out of whack. Like, what are the things that,
Yeah.
if these are in your life, then it is more helpful, and it's easier for you to maintain balance. Because I think for a lot of us, we know we're looking for it, but we may not always have identified the ideas of these are the things that help me to maintain balance.
Yeah. Do you want some practical things that I do?
Absolutely, doggone it.
Okay. For me personally, I don't plan any meetings before 10 o'clock in the morning. I'm an early riser, that for some people, 6:30, but I get in the word right away. I plan my day. I think about my day. I exercise. That to me is a priority. It helps my brain clear my brain. It's also a time of just sweet prayer for me
That's good.
running.
That's
Um,
good.
if I have any notes that I need to write, I mean, those things are important. Those personal touches to people, praying for people, and just listening to the Spirit on where He wants to lead you for that day. So
Mhm.
that's one thing I do. I try not to plan any meetings before 10. Sometimes if I start to feel overwhelmed, I will schedule time for me. Um, that is maybe an hour or two where I Yeah, it's a meeting on my calendar, but it's with myself. It's maybe I'm going to a coffee shop and I'm going to get a book, or I'm going to just be quiet, or go to a park and just sit. So I think knowing yourself and understanding what you need to stay healthy and clear minded is super important.
So, how did you figure out what you needed? You know, like sometimes age and time brings us clarity.
Mhm.
Sometimes it doesn't, because for our age and for our time, we've been so busy pouring into other people.
Yeah.
What did it look like for you to get clarity about what you needed in order to be good?
Gosh, burnout. I think burnout happened to me probably about 10 years ago. And I branded what I called a radical sabbatical. And I took 3 weeks where I just went off the grid. And because I was waking up, and sometimes when the stress level can just, you're like, first your feet hit the floor and phew, I'm like, that's not how I want to live. That's not how the Lord
That's
wants me
so
to live.
good. Yeah,
And so I stepped back and I just looked at my days and I said, you know what? I'm going to start implementing these things. And it was just a healthy reset for me, honestly.
that's so good. I always like to say, it's if you don't know, it's okay to have the things in your life that lead you to know. It just may
Yeah.
be not quite comfortable getting there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So thanks for being honest and sharing that.
Yeah. Sure.
Um, so and I love how you described, even though therefore something God given to you, you weren't necessarily looking for it, and God has obviously blessed it, and there's obviously a need, but that there is a way to associate it. Sometimes the very things that we know God has called us to, like ministry, like church, come with their own challenges.
Mhm.
Um, did you have to make any changes in how you serve at church in order to make room for therefore? And how are those, if so, how are those changes met?
Yeah. I did. I did. I think, for me, running therefore, meetings are necessary, and a lot of the people I work with, our meetings have to be in the evenings. Well, that would sometimes conflict with what was going on at church and my husband's meetings, or meetings that I had formerly been at. So there was a coming together and an understanding of looking at our calendar, his calendar, my calendar, and coming to terms with, hey, if you're going to do this and I'm going to do this, we can't do it all. And as a lot of saying no is a discipline as well.
Mm.
We can't say yes to everything. We just can't. And so learning that discipline of saying no is so healthy. Of course, I want to give as many yeses as I can, but that's not good or smart for any of us, especially
Yeah,
not our marriage.
yeah,
um,
exactly,
so
exactly.
yeah, we decided it's not as important if I go to this when I have this. So communicate.
Let's talk about communicating to the other people that are like, so you're not doing this anymore? What does it
Mm,
look like for you to manage the expectations of other people, who maybe have a vision of what you're supposed to be doing as a pastor's wife, or you were doing it as a pastor's wife, and now there's something else
yeah,
that you feel called to do, and they wrestle with that change. You talked about the discipline of saying no, but that no has to be communicated. So, what has
yeah.
worked for you, like back to practical, in actually
Mhm.
telling people instead of saying, 'cause sometimes that's what you want to
Right,
do, right?
right, right.
um, and communicating how you're not going to do that, or encouraging other people to step up to do some things that they could do without you being present.
100%. Um, if I'm asked to do something that I formerly did, I think the person is going to be disappointed that I'm not there for them anymore. But a lot of times I'd say, hey, let me help you find my replacement. Or have you thought about this? Because there's somebody else that can meet that need. You know, Maybe God is raising up a new volunteer or a new logistics person that hasn't stepped into something like that yet. It will be a blessing for them. So try to be a helper in that. But also, I don't think we have to give a lot of explanations all the time. I
That's good.
think that our answer can be, you know what, I'm sorry, I'm not able to be there.
Period.
Period.
That's so
So
good. Well, I love how you said, let me help you find someone, or you can do it. Like, even the burden of figuring it out doesn't have to be on you. It's you don't have to explain it. You also don't have to solve it all the time.
Right,
So
right,
I
right.
love how you were calling people up. Is that a natural gifting for you, calling people up in, because I know that you had to do that when you stepped away
Yeah,
in meeting other people's expectations, but I also know in leading this ministry and in leading this gathering that people who are volunteering and who have positions that you depend on, you probably have to do that too. And as you said earlier, the management of people is a whole thing. Is
yeah.
that something that is natural for you to do, to point at somebody and to say, I think you can do that? Like, let me step back and let you step up.
I think people did that for me. And so I think I saw how important that was. I'm okay to let people fail as well, to say, hey, I see this in you, run after it. I'll cheer you on, because we're constantly needing to raise up new leaders. We can't do it all. We can't. And I think, being willing to delegate and train and teach new leaders is, I mean, that's amazing. It's a privilege.
You mentioned seeing other people do it. And I just sense that for a lot of pastors' wives right now,
Mm,
because of the pandemic, and actually they were already doing a lot.
yeah,
And then the pandemic. So now they had to do more. They had to be the IT team.
yeah.
They had to be the Zoom team. They had to be, the fellowship hall creator of all the snacks when people started
Mhm.
coming back. I mean, because just volunteerism was a challenge with people not being comfortable coming back. So we've gone from having a lot to do to having a ridiculous amount to
Yeah.
do. And
Mhm.
they're listening to you right now and going, that sounds great. But I haven't seen anyone else do it. I have
Mhm.
no idea what it looks like
Yeah.
to delegate or to call people up. So what would you say to someone who really is like, I wish I had been taught that, but since I haven't, what tips would you give for how to do that?
Um, so number one, I think you have to be bold and let's look for it. Let's run after it. If I see somebody doing something that I'm like, I need that, I want that, I need to understand that more, don't be afraid to call somebody out of the blue and just say, teach me what you're doing, how you're doing that. I think I listen to other leaders. I listen to podcasts. I go search out somebody in a different organization, somebody that is leading a private school or whatnot. And, let's share how we do this, how we find these people, how we grow. Um, it's a lot of leading self. And I think sometimes, as pastors' wives, we're isolated and we do feel alone in what we're doing. And so there's a little gumption that we just have to go, okay, I can do this. There's grit. And I think God blesses that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. That's good. And I loved how you talked about self-leadership, because I think when we're, this idea of pursuing our passion project often means, just like it means in ministry, you enter ministry and there's a lot of things you don't know, but you figure it out.
Yeah,
Well, but there's kind of a template for that if you were raised in church or you knew some other people in ministry.
yes, right.
But if there's a passion project for you as a pastor's wife and you really don't know what you're doing, self leadership. I mean, God leads, God opens doors, but learning how to do what you don't know how to do, and that includes leading other people. You can learn that. You can read books, you can
For
listen to
sure.
podcasts, you can
Yeah.
watch other people, and let them even mentor you from a distance. So that's super helpful. Um, in terms of the struggles with the conference, with the pandemic,
Mhm.
talk a little bit about that. I mean, you've got an in-person girls conference. You pivoted, like we all pivoted, to doing something online. But I mean, this is an event. Like, people have to register for it. You're still doing things that, and this is on top of the craziness with church. So, can you talk about how the pandemic affected the conference, positive
Yeah.
or negative?
Oh, wow. And then you didn't mention this, but last year's conference, we had the pandemic and then we had the ice storm of the century when we were supposed to live stream it from our church. So it was like it was unbelievable, the impossible. Um, Golly, I think it has brought me to the end of myself, honestly. And that we use the word my faith was stretched a lot of times, kind of cliche, but there is so much more depth in to faith. I mean, faith, golly, when you are stripped and of everything and you have no control and all you have is the Lord, it is, woo, it's deep. So I think there was a lot of surrender that happened. I want to say daily, but it was more hourly.
Well, you said you had an ice storm. I mean, in the middle of the pandemic. So literally you pivoted to a live stream and
Right.
then you couldn't even, I mean, the church was a problem.
Right.
Um, when you got to the end of yourself, what did that look like? Did you become a crazy woman? Did you turtle? And like, what did that look like for you? How did you handle that?
Um, well, once I got to the end of myself and got on the other side of that, there was this awe of God that I have never experienced. This, he says, we hear that he can do the impossible, but he 100% can do the impossible. It was just probably a renewed heart of, I'm with you. Like, I see you ladies. I know you're struggling. I know you feel alone. I know this is hard, especially now. And I know it keeps going, but the Lord is with you and he wants you to be at that place of surrender with him.
You know, one of the difficult things in saying no, so that we can avoid the unavoidable getting to the ends of ourselves. Like some of them, they come because there's a pandemic and an ice storm and there's nothing you can do about it.
Right.
Some of them come because we work ourselves too hard
Yeah.
or we do too much or we won't delegate.
Yeah.
So when we finally get to the point where we're going to say no,
Right.
so I want to go back to that. I saw a question about that. The challenge is to say no gracefully, to just say it.
Yeah.
But then in the process of saying no, so that we don't get to burnout, so that we don't
Yeah.
unnecessarily get to the end of ourselves, preserving those relationships.
Hmm.
Um, how do you do that and preserve a relationship, or how do you deal with a relationship that cannot be preserved because someone is so frustrated, disappointed, or angry with you
Yeah.
because of your no?
So let's start with the preserving the relationship. Say I had to say no to somebody who had really counted on me, and that was a huge disappointment to them. I think reaffirmation of their value and their value in my life, but their value in the ministry is important. I mean, texts are great, phone calls are great, a quick coffee is great. To just say, I still love you, but I can't be a part of what you're doing right now in this time in my life. So I think you don't just cut them off, but you circle back and go, I see you, I love you still. Okay, preserving the relationship.
Okay.
And when the question about the broken relationship, I think sometimes who knows what's going on in their own life, but sometimes relationships just take a different place in a different season. And a friend that I had 5 years ago when we were running, this ministry together or whatever, and things change. I mean, that's a tricky one, but I just think we have to understand that things change in different seasons and where we are with our family, our kids, our health. And sometimes it's just going to look different.
There's a wise woman I know who wrote a book called Seasons of a Woman's Life. And so I'm in total 100% agreement with you there. Let's go back to the yielding conversation.
Okay.
I
Okay.
know that you said you have a theology of marriage that influences your theology of ministry.
Yeah.
Because the question really is what does a woman do who shares her passion project with her husband?
Hmm.
And he asks her to delay her passion project until the ministry is built. And there's already so much sacrifice. There's already so many things that have been put on the back burner. And
Hmm.
yet again, I got to wait now again.
Hmm.
Talk about that theology of marriage. And then, if you don't mind, just go on into answering that question. What's a woman to do? She's really excited and she's asked to hurry up and wait.
Hmm. Well, like you said, I think that, when I was in college, I studied architecture and we used blueprints to lay a strong foundation to build a house. And I think God does that when we marry our husband. He's laid a blueprint for our life, and I believe that my husband is called to steward my home and the ministry that he's given us, assuming that he's in men ministry, and that I and we are to work together, cheer each other on. But I'm a huge part of supporting what he does. I think sometimes when we are in a house, things change. We build a new wall, we move a wall, we replace lighting, and there are things that happen during our seasons of marriage, but the foundation of our marriage and our covenant commitment to that first
Yeah.
stays solid. That
Yeah.
makes sense.
It totally makes sense.
Um,
That's so good.
uh, Second question. What was your second question?
So what's a woman to do
Uh,
with that foundation that you just described when she's asked to hurry up and
Hurry up
wait?
and wait. Hurry up and wait. Golly. I do want to say that my project was not built overnight. So there's a piece of patience that I think we have to embrace, and not and sometimes there's a give and take during different seasons. My ministry looked different 8 years ago when I had kids at home than it does now. So I think we have to be sensitive to our relationship with the Lord first, our family, and then our ministry, um, so that it gets built the building blocks are built at the right order. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Totally makes sense. Totally makes sense. Yeah, I think, it's this idea of yielding is such an important one. I mean, ultimately, we're yielding to the Lord, to his plan for our lives. And then because, like you said, he's given a blueprint, um, sometimes we don't necessarily run into the wall that's supposed to be there, initially. And like you said, those conversations can be helpful because every fixture doesn't have to remain as it originally was
Right.
as you grow and you develop. So I like the permission to communicate. Everybody is not a bold communicator. Some of us want to run our mouths a million miles a minute, and our husband knows every second of every day what's on
Yeah.
our mind, right?
Yeah.
And then there are others of us who it takes a lot. It took a lot to share the dream,
Right.
and it's going to take a lot to talk about it again. So
Mhm.
for the woman who was asked to wait and then tucked it away,
Mhm.
and maybe she's tucked it away a little too long, what
Mhm.
encouragement would you give to her to, as she honors the foundation that should be laid and that should exist, to talk about it again? Because there's a fear sometimes. I don't want it to get
Yeah.
shot down again. I don't want
Yeah.
to be told again it's not time. So, what
Yeah.
would you say to that woman who's become timid about her passion,
Yeah.
or a dream that God put in her heart, and just needs to hear somebody encourage her to still hold on to that?
Specifically her husband.
Yes, specifically her husband.
Yeah. I think, I honestly think that husbands would be excited and honored to know that their wife is excited about a passion. I think we've all been given passions. It's just when are they birthed, you know?
That's
Um,
so good. That is right there. That was it. That was worth the price of admission. We've all been given passions. It's about the timing of their
mhm,
birth.
mhm.
That's so good. Love that.
Good.
Love that.
Yeah, I mean, if it were me and I had something that I was a little anxious about bringing up again with my husband, I would ease into it slowly, but I would go to a sweet dinner or somewhere where there would be no distractions. And I would just sit down and say, hey, this continues to be on my heart. I would love to share it with you. Let me just kind of set the buffet of what I'm thinking. I'd love your input. What do you think? Just let's talk together about this. Pull him into your dream. Don't just plop it out there. Let him be a part. He may be over the moon excited to support you.
That's so good. That's so good. I love that. I love the concept that you're describing, which is, even if it's a dream God gave you, that it's still a dream that can be shared. It's still a
Mhm.
dream. I mean, I've seen this, um, of course, as you and I have talked, but one of the things I think is phenomenal, Jenny Allen, you and I both know her,
Yeah.
to see her husband, Zach, he's always around. I mean, really and truly,
Yeah.
all for this vision that, God has given her.
Yeah.
And while she's not a pastor's wife, God has certainly born a great vision in her.
Mhm.
But it did have to wait for a season.
Yeah.
There was a season
Yeah.
where he was able to not only support her, but
Yeah.
also the season where she could incubate the dream and the vision that God gave to her.
Yeah.
Um, okay, we have a wife we know who already had a passion project, and then her husband was called to pastor a church.
Mhm.
With so many new responsibilities, she feels that she should table her project.
Mhm.
Any words of wisdom that you would give to her?
Hmm. I'm going to give you another practical thing that we do. Okay. And then remind me, we'll circle back to that super
Sure,
quick.
sure.
One thing that we do, we're running with these two big projects, a church and a ministry, is we are sensitive to each other's schedules, and I'd say we take it kind of a couple weeks at a time. If and we communicate. I'm gonna keep going back to that communication. But hey, I want to let you know that the next 2 weeks of my life are insane. So will you show me grace in this season?
That's good.
Because I've got this and this and this and this. So it's not you. I'm not ignoring you, but this is crazy. So there's a communication and understanding. There's another tool that we use that's super helpful. It's the simple phrase, how can I serve you today? It is seeing that my spouse has a lot on their plate, which we both do, but setting myself aside and always being willing to go, you know what? Yeah, I'm crazy busy. Yeah, you're crazy busy, but let me take the first step to letting us operate these things together side by side, and encouraging each other. So, how can I serve you today? How can I bless you today? I would say that ties into the communication with the wife that feels like she has to put stuff on hold. It just maybe setting a plan. Let's be practical. Go to her husband and go, do you think this is realistic? Do you think that I need to cut it down 50%? How could I do this? I mean, again, going back and getting his input, not just assuming something from the beginning, but getting his input and working together so that she can still thrive, you know?
That's good. I think that this I have to ask this.
Yeah.
Sometimes when you ask that question and you do mean it, but
Yeah.
what you get in response, you're like, "Oh my, you want me to do what today?"
Yeah. Yeah.
So is it always a wide open question? And when you say because even apart from personal passion projects,
Yeah.
there's the reality of the responsibility of kids or
Yeah.
dinner or maybe work. Some pastors' wives, of course, work outside the home. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
how do you ask that question in a way where you're not setting yourself up for failure or
Uh-huh.
him up for disappointment?
Now, what I didn't mention was, I mean, it could be as much as, "Hey, honey, I need deodorant from the store." It's not a big, "I need you to redo the whole landscape in the backyard." But, I think it's making your spouse aware that I see you. I understand that you are working hard in what God has called you to. And it's not an everyday thing. It's an awareness of what's happening in our worlds and
Yeah.
keeping our marriage central.
So, as we come to a close, just as we've talked about all of these different things related to a passion that God may give a woman, whether it's the time for that passion to be born and visible to everyone else, or whether there's a passion, a gift, a dream to be incubated. As you think about the pastors' wives that are watching right now and that will watch after this, sits there and does what social media does, if you could say something to the woman who does not feel that she has a passion, she's faithfully serving.
Mm,
She sees other people maybe leading ministries or teaching or
mhm.
just feeling that there's positions of influence and they're like, well, I don't, this is great, but this is not even a struggle because I don't have one. What would you say to her?
Oh, wow. I would say ask the Lord, be quiet, be still. Think about who God has made you to be. What are your sweet spots? What do you love doing? Where do you find joy? Start writing a few of those things down. Ask a friend that knows you well, hey, what do you see in me that you think that would be really beneficial in ministry? Or what do you see me, what am I good at? I mean, be brave. That's what friends are for, and so I think asking yourself, asking the Lord, and asking friends, and just kind of starting down that path.
That's really good. Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us and giving me the opportunity to hopefully introduce you to some women who before today didn't know uh, who you were and maybe now can follow along with the passion that God has given you in There4 Gathering. Again, this is Tiffany Daniels. And if you are interested in finding out more about this conference that is designed for teenage girls, please go to their number four, there4gathering.com and find out more about the work that she's doing and for the young women in your life, encouraging them to come. They will be blessed. And I know that this is a passion God has given Tiffany. It's evident by how he's blessing it for the growth of it, but also for the growth in each individual girl. So God bless as you continue on that journey. And thank you so much for joining today, Tiffany.
It was great. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Chrystal.
You're welcome. Y'all, that was so good. I'm telling you, I just feel like I have the pastor's wife inside scoop a little bit because I'm the pastor's daughter, right? So I have the family situation in my head, but I know that for me, even as a wife of a man who's not a pastor, that was just life giving to me. So I hope it was life giving to you. And I hope that the encouragement that she gave as a seasoned, wise pastor's wife gave you some practical takeaways that you can use as you navigate your marriage, navigate the ministry, and navigate your purpose and the passions that God has given you. Just a couple of things that I want to mention to you. The first thing is just to underscore the last thing that Tiffany said, where regardless of the fact that you know what your passion is, or you feel that you know what God is calling you to do, or if you have no idea, there's nothing on the horizon, you don't feel like you're doing anything special, or even if you stop doing what you were doing, that anyone would notice. I'm a believer, a big believer, as so the word teaches, that small things are really where it's at anyway. But if you are wanting to hold your passion with purpose, and if you're wanting to take the pain point maybe of not feeling like you have a passion and figure out what to do with it, either way, either way, what you want to do is take those passions or the feeling of the lack thereof to the Lord. What we know for sure is that each of us were divinely created. What I know for sure is that each one of you, as a woman, as a daughter of the King, and even as a pastor's wife, that the things that he has put in you, he designed you to cultivate and grow those gifts. And so going to God and saying, how do you want me to use my life? How do you want me to use my life to support this ministry, to support this man? And is there any way that I don't see that you want me to serve additionally in ministry, ministering to others, in the workplace, in my church, in my community? And if there is, and there's something I don't know, my hands are open and I'm open to receive your plan for me. Show me how to build up who I am. Show me how to develop the girl I can be, the woman that I can be, the wife that I can be, the leader that I can be, and help me to walk the steps that you've ordered for me. The good news is you don't have to figure all of it out on your own. And as Tiffany already shared, even with passion and vision, with COVID and with an ice storm, she still ran into things she couldn't plan for. So whether you know the passion and know the vision, or whether you feel devoid of passion or devoid of vision, either way, we all need God's help so that he will order our steps, so that no matter what we're running into, knowledge or lack thereof, that we have his guidance and direction to lead us. And at the end of the day, that's all you need. If just in case you needed me to tell you, at the end of the day, that is all you need, is his guidance and direction. This video is brought to you, this live stream today. And if you're watching this after, is brought to you by the Pastor's Wives Ministry. That is a ministry of the Tony Evans Ministry, the Urban Alternative. Tony Evans, of course, Dr. Tony Evans being my father. And my mom loved Pastor's Wives. It was a high priority for her to not only provide opportunities for Pastor's Wives to connect, but for Pastor's Wives to grow. And in her honor and in her legacy, we are continuing that ministry. And one of the ways that we're doing that is by sharing broadcasts like this, so that we can bring friends of the ministry, women that I know, women that have mentored my mom, mom, been a friend to my mom, mentored me, or been a friend to me, and to share their voices and their perspective with you as a pastor's wife. And then our hope is that the overflow of those discussions, regardless of whether you're a pastor's wife or not, that they're a blessing to you in your ministry and in your marriage. So I want you to know what else is available to you from this ministry of Dr. Tony Evans and Lois Evans. The first thing is that if you're a pastor's wife, there is a Facebook group for you. We put this together so that there is a safe place for you to gather and have discussions, to pray, to ask questions, to mentor, or to be mentored. And you can find out more about that group by going to loisevans.org/. Facebook group. Again, this is a Facebook group just for pastors' wives. So if you're a pastor's wife, feel free to check that community out. I know it'll be a blessing to you. Another thing that we do is to share newsletters that are designed to encourage you as a pastor's wife. And you can sign up to receive that newsletter by going to loisevans.org/newsletter. We have a team of writers. Some of them are pastors' wives who are writing with you in mind to respond to the pain points that we know you have. We held a session last year with pastors' wives that we know and love very well and said, how can we serve you? Going into 2022, what can we talk about? What are the topics that we can bring to the surface? What are the things that would be helpful? Because we want to be helpful and want to serve you well. And so the newsletter is one of those things too, where we are sharing devotional content, encouraging content, practical content that meets you right where you are. And then if you just need to flip through your phone on Instagram while you're looking at everything else that may not put you in a good brain space, sometimes Instagram just makes us look at everybody else's life and think about what's not right in ours. But if you want some encouragement, there's a great place on Instagram as you're flipping for you to have something encouraging designed for you in mind, to encourage your soul. And you can go to the Pastors Wives Ministry at Pastors Wives Ministry on Instagram, to make sure you're following that as well. I want you to save the date for our next event. Our next event will be on February the 10th at 11 a.m. We'll be talking about re-engaging the flock. If your church is like mine, even if your church is open and people are coming back, they're not coming back the way they were, some out of concern because COVID is still a thing, obviously, and they're not ready. Some are coming back because they're living their whole lives. They're going to work and their kids are doing sports and they're going to the movies and they're going to the mall. And so they're like, I should go to church. We know at our church, some people are not wanting to come back because they don't want to wear masks. We're in Texas, y'all. And we are able in many places to not have to wear them. And so people don't want to come to church if they have to wear masks, or they just got out of the habit of going to church. We spoiled them, right? Now church, even if your church wasn't online, it is now. And so people are deciding if they want to come in the building or if they'd rather stay home in their pajamas, cuddled up with their cup of coffee. Coming back to church is a whole situation. And we know that you in your church, along with your husband, as y'all shepherd your flock, it's something that you're dealing real time with. And so that's a real conversation that we're going to have to talk about, a real issue that is a topic of discussion for many ministries I know. So be sure and save the date, because we want to get people back into church after the pandemic. But this is not about even the pandemic. Sometimes it's hard to get people back into church after church hurt or other trauma. And at the end of the day, it's really, how do we love people back to a place of worship, to a place of community, so that we are honoring the assembling of ourselves together. So I want you to know that we are here for you. There's a YouTube channel for Lois Evans that we're using to stream for you. There's the Facebook page, there's the Instagram, there's the Facebook group, there's the newsletter, and then there are events like this one. And so our hope is that you feel encouraged, is that you feel practically tooled, and that you know that you are thought of probably more often than you know. My mother, again, left a legacy of caring for pastors' wives, and we want to continue that, to minister to you, but also to encourage the people that you minister to encourage you. There's so many things that go into the seeing of the pastor's wife, the encouraging of the pastor's wife, the education and the empowerment of the pastor's wife. And you need to know that I, along with our team and the backing that we have from Tony Evans Ministries, Dr. Tony Evans, and the Urban Alternative, we are all here and committed to you. So thank you so much for joining us. I pray you were blessed, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.